Hey guys, tonight we're not just pulling up a straw mattress and shivering our way through another medieval night. We're slipping into the velvet dark of a world that believed dreams weren't just dreams. They were omens, warnings, punishments, gifts from heaven, or whispers from something far less friendly. You're not alone when you sleep. At least, not in the year 1324. You're wrapped in wool. Scratchy, coarse, probably shared with a goat at some point, and definitely not warm enough. Outside your crooked shutters, the wind whines like a soul that missed confession. The fire's a stubborn pile of glowing resentment. But you're not just lying down to rest, you're preparing for a journey. A risky one. Because in the medieval mind, falling asleep meant opening a door, and behind that door, anything could be waiting. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where in the world you're watching from and how many of you are listening in the quietest corners of the night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your body is tired, yes, but your soul, it's alert. Back then, people believed sleep wasn't passive. It wasn't you snooze, you lose. It was you snooze, you invite. Scholars across Christendom debated what happened when you closed your eyes. Was it the soul wandering the celestial spheres, or demons sneaking through the cracks of consciousness like spiritual burglars? Theologians from Gregory the Great to Albertus Magnus wrote treatises that practically shouted, "Pay attention to your dreams. They matter." Sleep was considered sacred and suspicious. Monks recorded their visions in scratchy Latin, terrified and amazed at what they'd seen. A woman in 1273 claimed the Virgin Mary visited her in her dreams and told her to fast. The problem? She couldn't write. So she told a monk who wrote it down, and now it's in a manuscript next to recipes for pigeon pie and how to heal gout. Fringe beliefs weren't exactly fringe in the Middle Ages. Your neighbor could believe that falling asleep during Vespers might cause your soul to leave your body and not return. They might whisper that a witch could pluck your dreams and wear them like a cloak. One farmer's wife in Kent reportedly slept facing east for 3 years because she believed it kept demonic visions at bay. Honestly, that's better than most sleep hacks on YouTube. And speaking of hacks, there were rituals. Oh, so many rituals. You don't just lie down. You pray. You kiss the cross. You sprinkle salt. You recite protective psalms. You place sprigs of rosemary or saint medallions under your pillow. One noble woman supposedly slept with a dagger beneath her sheets, just in case the devil shows up looking familiar. Mainstream scholars note that dreams were often considered divine communication, especially for the illiterate majority. You couldn't read the Bible? Fine. God would just send you the message himself in full cinematic dream format, preferably with angels and a talking fish. But be careful, if the fish turns into your ex-husband and starts quoting Leviticus, it might be a trick. You lie there now, body still, breath even, but your mind is wandering. A bell in the distance tolls midnight. The demon hour, some call it. The veil is thin. You feel a flicker behind your eyes, a flicker that feels inhabited. Historians still argue whether the intensity of medieval dream beliefs reflected widespread sleep deprivation or something deeper, a cultural lens that saw the invisible in everything. The blurred line between reality and metaphor wasn't just poetic, it was the rule. Night wasn't an absence of day, it was its own world, governed by different laws. And this world, it's not empty. You slip into that half-aware place where images dance like fireflies and logic folds in on itself. You see a road, a stranger, a crowned figure with bleeding hands. Is it Christ? A demon? Your cousin Jeffrey with a flair for drama? You can't tell. And that's the terrifying, wonderful part. Every dream is a test, every symbol a riddle. Somewhere a nun wakes screaming, clutching a dream of serpents. Somewhere else, a baker dreams of wheat turning to gold and wakes convinced he's destined for greatness, or delusion. The line between prophecy and madness is thinner than the blanket on your straw bed. But you don't wake. Not yet. You float. And as your dream unfurls, you know this. The stakes aren't just emotional or spiritual. Some towns banish dreamers. Some exalt them. One Benedictine monk wrote that he was beaten for confessing a dream where an angel accused the local abbot of gluttony. The abbot didn't take that well. So as you sleep, Deep now, breath soft, body warm despite the cold, you carry within you a possibility, of vision, of warning, of contact. You've begun the journey, and whether that figure approaching in your dream is angel or trickster, well, that's the question we'll carry into the next hour. You're not awake anymore, but your mind is painting in symbols, carving meaning from flickers of memory and murmurs of your own soul. This is no random neural static, not in your time, not in the medieval world. Here, your dreams are not just your own, they are part of a grand theater of the heavens, and you're both the audience and the stagehand. Tonight's dream begins with light, not sunlight, but something softer, golden like melted candle wax, pouring over fields you've never seen but feel oddly familiar. You walk toward a tree you've never touched, but you know it's important. In the real world, you're still curled in your drafty hut, but in this space you are upright, weightless, and observed. In medieval theology, dreams weren't random access files of your subconscious. They were seen as spiritual communications filtered through the body. Divine dreams came with a clarity you could feel in your bones. They were marked by peace, revelation, or even saintly instruction. There are dozens of recorded visions where peasants claimed the Virgin Mary gave them specific advice on what to plant or how to heal. And when they listened, their crops thrived. When they didn't, well, let's just say those stories don't usually end with a feast. Two primary types of dreams were viewed as divine. Visio, the clear vision that felt like watching a holy film, and oraculum, a spoken message from a divine being. One monk reportedly dreamt of a ladder reaching to heaven, echoing Jacob's vision. He climbed it in the dream, step by trembling step, until he saw the crucified Christ smile at him. When he awoke, he cried for an hour. That monk later gave away all his possessions and walked barefoot for the rest of his life. We don't recommend that. But he felt called. You roll in your straw bed. The candle stub at your bedside has guttered out. Your dream self kneels now in front of a glowing figure. No face, just light. It speaks. You don't remember the words upon waking, but the tone stays with you, warm, knowing, like a teacher you somehow trust more than your local priest. Mainstream historians agree that many medieval dreamers took such visions as divine commands. A woman named Hildegard of Bingen, who was eventually canonized, experienced luminous, elaborate visions for decades. She described the living light, speaking to her, dictating theology, music, and medicine. She wasn't burned at the stake. She was promoted. Her dreams became books, and her books became doctrines. But the average dreamer wasn't so lucky. You couldn't exactly stroll into town and announce that St. Michael had visited you in the night unless you had the right social status or the right priest backing you up. The line between visionary and heretic was dangerously thin. Even those with peaceful dreams of heavenly gardens risked suspicion if they deviated too far from accepted dogma. And not all divine dreams came wrapped in gold and angel wings. Some were trials, morality plays played out on the stage of your unconscious. A friar once recorded dreaming he was being chased through a dark forest by a beast with 7 heads. When he awoke, he fasted for a week, convinced it was a warning about pride, gluttony, and the dangers of forgetting to tithe. Fringe accounts tell of a woman in Flanders who dreamed of floating into a cathedral filled with bees. She believed it was a sign to become a beekeeper for the monastery. No one argued. They were just glad she wasn't predicting another plague. You, still drifting in your dream, are now walking across water, not like Jesus, more like it's frozen. Beneath the surface, flickers of faces, some you know, some you don't, glide like fish. You feel the stirrings of understanding in your chest, not your head. In this world, logic doesn't matter. Symbols do. Historians still argue whether such dreams were truly from God, or if they were simply the mind's attempt to make sense of chaos in a deeply spiritual society. Some claim the prevalence of visions was related to malnutrition, sleep disruption, or even ergot poisoning from bad bread. But tell that to a nun who dreamt of heaven's staircase and woke with the scent of lilies in her cell. You stir again. Your real-world body shifts under the itchy blanket. Your toes press against the cool edge of the mattress. But your dream self stands now at a gate, a beautiful gate. On the other side, a loved one long lost, or maybe a saint, or both. The figure nods, then fades. You wake, not with a start, but with a long, deep exhale. Your breath fogs in the chill air of your room. The the fire has died. Again, your goat snores in the corner. Somewhere outside, a cock crows prematurely like it's testing the dawn. Was it a divine vision? A whisper from God? Or was it just the last flicker of your imagination? The answer doesn't matter. Not really, because in the medieval world, the moment you close your eyes, you open the door, and someone, or something, might step through. Barely back in the dark before something grabs at your chest, not physically, not really, but it feels like being pinned beneath a heavy woolen mass that's damp and angry. You try to breathe, but the air is thick and slow, like cold porridge. This isn't peace. This is intrusion. You know it, instinctively. Your limbs won't move, your voice won't work, your heart hammers out the rhythm of fear, and your body, still sleeping, fights a war your waking mind can't yet join. Welcome to the nightmare, or as your medieval neighbors would call it, a visitation. In the Middle Ages, bad dreams weren't just bad luck or stress-related nonsense. They were serious business. If a vision from a saint was guidance from the divine, then nightmares were knock-knock jokes from the underworld. Only no one laughed, not really, especially when the thing sitting on your chest had horns, hooves, or was shaped like your dead uncle whispering lies. The term incubus dates back to Roman times, but in medieval lore, it flourished into something far more terrifying. A male demon who visited women in their dreams, sat on their chests and drained them of energy. His female counterpart, the succubus, did the same to men. Both were said to disguise themselves as lovers, servants, or strangers before revealing their true form. Sometimes they left physical signs, scratches, bruises, or worse. You twitch in your straw-filled bed. In your dream, your breath still won't come. You're looking at a window that wasn't there before, glowing red. Something stands behind it, watching. Clerics debated whether such entities were real demons or figments of sinful thoughts made manifest. But for the peasant woman waking up with blood in her nose and the smell of brimstone on her blanket, the debate felt irrelevant. And it wasn't just demons with wings and smirks you had to worry about. There were also Altdruck, the German elf pressure, a malevolent spirit that crept onto your chest and made your dreams go sideways. France had the Cauchemar. Scandinavia had the Mare, a phantom rider who galloped through your sleep and left you waking in sweat and dread. Sound familiar? You try to sit up in your dream, but the ceiling keeps lowering. The floor softens into mud. In the corner of your dream room, something breathes. You pray. It helps a little, but the thing still waits. Some fringe accounts from the Alps describe people placing iron scissors under their pillows or smearing pig fat on doorways to ward off dream intruders. Others left out stale bread soaked in holy water. One particularly odd practice involved sleeping with a mirror face up under your bed so spirits would get trapped in their own reflection. No word on how well that worked, but hey, at least it's creative. You clench your teeth. In the dream, something touches your ankle. You kick. The room shifts, and suddenly, you're awake. Just like that, the weight is gone. You're damp with sweat, your fingers are tingling, your goat snores obliviously. There's no demon in the room, at least none you can see. Mainstream scholars still argue whether sleep paralysis and night terrors inspired the demon lore, or whether cultural belief shaped the dream experience itself. Chicken and egg. Or rather, goat and hay. You don't care. All you know is that you're exhausted, and your bed still smells like panic. In the dim pre-dawn, you whisper a prayer to Saint Benedict, patron against evil spirits. You hope he's listening. Just in case, you reach under your mat and feel for the iron nail you placed there last week. Still there, cool to the touch, possibly doing nothing, possibly saving your soul. Back in bed, you stare at the ceiling. You know you'll fall asleep again. You have to. The body needs rest. But the mind, it's been shaken, stirred, rattled like an old bell in the belfry. Even monks weren't immune to these nightly horrors. Some kept journals describing their visions, beasts with bleeding mouths, serpents with human eyes, black dogs who whispered Latin scripture in reverse. One monk, Brother Adhelm, recorded a recurring dream of being swallowed by a lion with a monk's voice. No one knew what it meant. He later claimed it was a warning about gluttony. His fellow monks mostly just stopped eating with him. You shift again under the blankets. Still cold, still damp, still you. The fire has gone out entirely. You should get up and rebuild it, but instead you lie there, wide-eyed, feeling the echo of that dream's claws on your ribs. You're not alone. Somewhere in another cottage, Matilde is doing the same, lying awake wondering if that thump she heard was a falling icicle or something worse. Maybe you both dreamt of the same black shape. Maybe it visits all of you, one by one. And still, life continues. Morning will come. You'll fetch water. You'll chop wood. You'll share awkward glances with neighbors who all quietly suspect that some nights the devil walks behind your dreams and leaves footprints in the snow. For now, you whisper a lullaby, not to yourself this time, but to whatever watches from the edge. Sleep, little devil. Sleep far away. You drift again, not quite asleep, not quite awake. Somewhere in the hush between breaths, the world you know blurs at the edges, and in that gap, something stranger takes shape. You find yourself walking along a narrow corridor of marble arches and endless candles, though no flame flickers and no wind stirs. You are alone, or maybe being watched. Welcome to the hierarchy. In the medieval worldview, not all dreams were equal. Theologians and scholars, Augustine, Isidore of Seville, even later thinkers like Thomas Aquinas, labored to classify dreams into neat little theological pigeonholes. They believed some dreams came from God, some from demons, and some from your dinner. No, really. Phantasmata, caused by indigestion or bad sleep posture, were considered a category. Eat too much salted fish, expect to dream of swimming serpents and wailing children. Naturally, you pass through the candlelit corridor and step into a sun-drenched field, only it's nighttime. You hear singing in a language you almost understand. A voice like your mother's, but it isn't hers. Maybe it's the Angelus Dreamus, one of those rare divine intrusions where heaven decides to text you at 3 a.m. In medieval texts, dreams were divided into three main sources: somnium, natural from the body; visio, prophetic, divine origin; and insomnium, illusion, often demonic. But even within that neat structure, things got messy. What if your visio contradicted church doctrine? What if your insomnium predicted something that came true? Suddenly, your prophetic moment becomes a heretical inconvenience. You stumble in the dream field and fall onto grass that hisses like snakes. You blink, and now you're in your cottage again, staring at your hands. Your palms are stained red, but your fire isn't lit, and your goat, Berta, is chanting psalms in Latin. You definitely didn't eat salted fish tonight. Fringe accounts mention that the church sometimes appointed dream interpreters in monasteries, brothers trained to listen to your dreams and classify them for safety. One nun dreamed that the Virgin Mary handed her a flaming loaf of bread. Her dream was marked divine consolation. Another monk claimed he dreamt of flying naked above the cathedral and was told, rather sternly, to fast for a week. Meanwhile, you reach for a cup that wasn't on the table before. It's filled with a glowing liquid that smells like honey and wood smoke. You drink. Your mouth fills with the taste of stories, forgotten prayers, old songs, whispered sins, and behind it all, judgment. Historians still argue whether medieval dream hierarchies were more influenced by classical Greek theory, hello again, Aristotle and Galen, or whether the church developed its own rigid framework to keep lay people from trusting their own unconscious minds. Probably both. Either way, it meant your dreams weren't just yours. They were subject to audit. In the dream, a figure appears, robed, faceless, hovering inches above the ground. They carry a balance scale and a key. You try to ask a question, but your lips melt, literally. The figure lifts the scale, and on one side is your face. On the other, the word maybe. You wake with a start. The fire is still out. The room smells like old wood and onion, but the taste of honey and smoke lingers. You sit up slowly, listening to the creak of the rafters. Outside, the wind whines. Berta snores. All ordinary things. But your mind is still wrapped in that dream like old vellum, parchment soaked in meaning and a little madness. The idea that dreams had categories was comforting in a way. It meant there were rules, systems, interpretations. Just as diseases had humors and stars had houses, your nightly visions could be filed away in neat theological drawers. You dreamed of fire? A sign of purification. Of falling? An invitation to humility. Of dogs biting your ankles? Possibly demonic. Possibly guilt about stealing Matilde's egg last week. Who can say? Still, you wish there was a dream interpreter nearby. Someone with ink-stained fingers and patient eyes who would hear your strange corridor and say, "Ah, yes," clearly an angelic visitation, complicated by a subconscious fear of your goat. You lie back down, the straw pokes your spine, you try to remember the robed figure's face. You can't. Just that scale. Just that word. Maybe. You lie awake longer than usual. The straw beneath you is unforgiving, and your mind still echoes with a single floating word. Maybe. There's something sticky about that kind of uncertainty. It clings to the inside of your chest like smoke. Eventually, though, your body takes over. You drift again, slipping not into peace, but into a theater built entirely from memory, guilt, and the writings of a long-dead bishop. You're inside a chapel now. Stained glass windows cast fractured light across a stone floor. You are alone, yet not. In front of you, a carved wooden pulpit, worn smooth by centuries of elbows and oration. But tonight, the voice you hear isn't your priest's. It's Augustine's. Saint Augustine, the man who famously asked whether dreams were sins if the body acted without the soul's permission. You can't tell if he's judging you or just narrating. The philosopher's thoughts bounce through your skull like loose stones in a barrel. He believed dreams were echoes of the waking world, filtered through your soul's internal theater, a divine stage where God, demons, and your own muddled desires could all take turns playing puppeteer. In his Confessions, he wrote about the guilt of dreaming about things he no longer wanted, of waking with shame from cravings he thought he'd beaten. Your dream morphs again. Now you're in a small wooden boat on a black lake. The stars above look like eyes, wide, unblinking. Augustine sits at the bow writing, occasionally glancing at you like he knows you haven't repented for stealing that piece of cheese last Tuesday. 2 ducks paddle past, muttering in Latin. You're pretty sure one of them is Matilde. Back in the real Middle Ages, theologians wrestled with what dreams said about morality. If you dreamt of sin, stealing, lust, violence, was it your fault? Or was your sleeping soul innocent, like a locked church whose door had been left open by the devil? Some argued your dreams revealed your true nature. Others claimed dreams were just the aftershocks of living in a broken world. You lean over the edge of the dream boat. Below, you see your own face reflected, but it's shifting. Young, then old, then cloaked in shadow. Then it splits into 2. One smiles, one weeps. Fringe texts, many hidden in monastery basements, describe dreams as battlegrounds for souls. The dream realm was a liminal space where angels might test you and demons might tease out your weaknesses. You weren't just watching a play, you were the stage, the actors, and sometimes the knife. The dream darkens again. You're no longer in a boat, you're back in your room, but the walls pulse like a heartbeat. The rafters drip candle wax, and your fire is burning backward. Flame pulls downward into the coals like breath in reverse. You watch, frozen. Augustine once said that the mind retains impressions of things long after they pass, and that dreams are proof of the soul's ceaseless motion. Even when your body collapses, the soul keeps walking, talking, searching. That idea comforts you and terrifies you in equal measure. Historians still argue whether Augustine's dream philosophy shaped more than just monastic thinking. Some believe his influence filtered into peasant superstitions and even court judgments. If a man claimed he'd sinned in a dream, was he confessing something deeper? Or simply afraid his visions might be used as evidence? You reach for the backward fire, hoping to warm your hands, but it hisses and turns into ink. Black, sticky ink. It runs over your fingers. You wake with a start, your hand clutched tight and slick with nothing, just sweat. The room is cold. The fire is out again. Of course. You sit up slowly. Berta snores in the corner, and the cat yawns unimpressed. The dream is fading, but Augustine's voice lingers. That frustrating, insistent voice that always manages to ask questions without giving you answers. You mutter to yourself, half sarcastic, "Thanks, Augustine." From the ceiling, something creaks in agreement. You sigh, wrap your cloak tighter, and wonder, not for the first time, if perhaps the dreams aren't the strange part. Maybe it's this life. This cold, cramped, sleepless life built around saints and soup and straw beds, where the most profound questions of your soul come not in church, but in a dream shaped like a boat, a duck, and a man with too many opinions. The cold is back. Not the air exactly, but something colder than that. It's in your chest, in your neck, in that unsettling space just behind your ears. You try to fall asleep again, but there's a pressure now. Not weighty like a blanket, but sharp and coiled like someone watching. And then you hear it, the whisper, that tiny scratching at the edge of the ceiling. It could be rats. It probably is rats, but it sounds like breath, like something crouched low and waiting. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. The old woman down the lane swears she once woke to find a demon crouched at the foot of her bed, whispering in a voice that wasn't made for human ears. The baker's apprentice claims he was pressed so hard in his sleep he couldn't move, couldn't breathe, until he cried out to Saint Michael, and the weight vanished in a rush of wind. And Mathilde, bless her endlessly weird heart, swears the demon left muddy hoofprints on her sheets. These weren't just idle tales to pass time by the hearth. These were warnings. Nightmares weren't just dreams gone wrong. They were visitations. Proof that your soul, even in sleep, could be hunted. You shift in your straw pile, suddenly convinced that the shadows in the corner have rearranged themselves. Medieval people took dreams seriously, but nightmares even more so. They were often considered direct evidence of spiritual attack. You could confess them. You could be punished for them, especially if they hinted at lust, heresy, or anything the church had decided made you vulnerable to Satan's antics. And so you do what countless sleepers before you have done. You whisper a prayer, not aloud, not fully, just enough to wrap your thoughts in something older than fear. You think of iron keys. Mathilde says they keep demons from entering thresholds. You don't have a key, but you place your cracked wooden spoon by the door anyway. If anything crosses that line, you hope it likes stew. Fringe folklore tells of creatures that press down on sleeping chests, night hags, alpdruck, or what some monks scribbled in margins as nocturnus daemonium. These were creatures of the dark, drawn by sin, weakness, or sometimes just boredom. The pressure on your chest is all in your head, probably. You curl tighter beneath your cloak. The straw beneath you rustles with the sound of ancient paper. Every creak of the roof sounds like footsteps you can't place, and your mind, still wired from Augustine's boat dream, begins to paint pictures you wish it wouldn't. Someone once told you that demons often appear in sleep as people you trust. Your mother, your child, a lover long dead. And then, just as you lower your guard, they whisper lies right into your soul. It's nonsense, you tell yourself. Then you remember last winter when old Bernard dreamed of his brother begging for help. And 2 days later, Bernard died in his sleep. Coincidence? Or message? Or something else? You stare at the dying embers. They look like watching eyes now, little red ones blinking in tandem. Mainstream records from monasteries describe what they called dormitory possession, when a monk's sleep was plagued so badly by demonic forces, his brothers would have to restrain him and chant psalms until dawn. Some cases were written off as epilepsy, others exorcised. Historians still argue whether these stories were early psychological observations or something more. Was it sleep paralysis or Satan? Was it a troubled mind or an open door? You try not to think about it, but the room feels smaller and colder and hungrier. You mutter another prayer, you stare at your spoon, you consider lighting the fire again, but your limbs refuse to move. And then the cat jumps on your chest, your soul leaves your body, you choke down a scream, it purrs, you whisper a curse, pet it anyway. Even now, in the darkest hours, you're still subject to the feline overlord of this house. Eventually the fear subsides, a little. The demon in the corner turns back into a sack of onions. Probably. The ceiling rat resumes its polite scuttling, and the shadows, having tested you, retreat. You breathe. Still alive, still cold, still in one piece, mostly. You wonder if tomorrow will be better, if sleep will come without battle, if your dreams will stay yours. And then you remember, this is the Middle Ages. Nothing stays yours for long, not even sleep. The bell tolls once, just once, and though you don't know how, you know it's real. Not a dream bell, not a phantom. A real iron-forged sound that echoes faintly across stone and wood, stirring something ancient in your bones. You sit up. Church bells in the middle of the night aren't casual things. They're calls, to prayer, to danger, to something in between. You throw your cloak around your shoulders, pull on your boots, still damp from yesterday, and step outside. The village is still asleep, or pretending to be. No one lights a lamp, no one calls out, except at the chapel. There, a few figures are gathered, thin silhouettes wrapped in heavier wool, standing silently beneath the sagging eaves of the wooden chapel. One by one they file in, not with urgency, but with that particular dread you only see when sleep has been traded for ritual. You follow. You don't come here often. Not because you don't believe, everyone believes in something, but because it's hard to find comfort in a place where the saints look down on you with chiseled disappointment. Inside, it smells of old wood, dried herbs, and candle wax. A small fire crackles at the front, and the priest, Father Anselm, is already standing near the altar. He looks older than usual, or maybe just more tired. No one speaks. They lie down. Yes, lie. On mats. On the stone floor. They tuck their hands under their heads or cross themselves quietly. It looks like sleep, except every eye is still open. This is a vigilia somni, a dream vigil. You've heard about it, but never seen one. It's not a service. Not quite. It's a waiting room for divine messages. Medieval dream temples weren't just Greek myths. Christian versions took root in hidden corners of Europe. Pilgrims would sleep near relics or within consecrated spaces, hoping to receive healing, answers, or visions. Tonight, the people here want guidance or absolution. Father Anselm speaks, softly. A psalm, half remembered and barely breathed, then silence again. You lie down too. The stone is merciless. Cold creeps into your bones like ink-soaking parchment, and yet your mind begins to shift, as if the sacred air itself is an invitation. You close your eyes, and you dream. First it's smoke, then a wheel, spinning, burning, made of glass and feathers. A voice speaks in a language you understand only because you don't question it. And then, just the dream begins to open its mouth, it collapses. You wake up gasping. So do two others. One weeps, one vomits. Father Anselm says nothing. Some medieval accounts mention these group dreams as collective revelation, where entire villages saw the same vision. Others were more ambiguous, just a feeling, a presence, a word whispered that wasn't meant for your ears alone. And if the dream doesn't come, that's its own answer. There are records of people who slept for 7 nights beside relics without a single vision. They left more broken than when they arrived. You wonder what yours meant, or if it meant anything. Someone outside coughs. The sun is just beginning to flirt with the horizon, and the vigil is over. No proclamation, no explanation, just a soft gesture from Anselm to go in peace, whatever peace means in a place like this. As you step out, the air has shifted, not warmer, just changed, like the sky knows what you saw and is deciding whether to let you forget. Fringe texts from monastic archives describe the dream vigil as a purification rite. You don't feel purified. You feel hollow, like something has been scooped out to make room for something else. You hope it's divine. You hope it's not a trick. Historians still argue whether these nocturnal rituals were theological invention or psychosomatic therapy before such a term existed. Some point to the placebo power of relics. Others say faith doesn't need explaining. You just know this. Your dream didn't lie. Something came to you in the dark. Something old. Something knowing. You don't speak of it. None of you do. The others shuffle home through dew-crusted grass. One man carries a candle that's already gone out. Another walks with his eyes closed, still dreaming. You return to your hovel, your straw, your goat who now refuses to make eye contact, and for a moment just before sleep claims you again, you wonder, what if tonight was the most honest conversation you'll ever have? The next day feels slower, like the world is holding its breath. You move through it not as someone fully awake, but as someone who brushed against something ancient and is now trying not to trip over reality. Your feet carry you to the well, your hands carry the bucket, your mind carries the weight of a dream you're pretending not to remember. But there's always someone to remind you. Matilde. She's standing at the corner, wrapped in shawls, eyes like dried ink on parchment. You went to the chapel, she mutters, not as a question. You nod. She spits, not in contempt, in tradition. Don't let the dream eat your waking. It's not a phrase you've heard before, but it doesn't feel like the kind you ask about either. Officially, the church isn't big on independent dreaming. Not yours, not Matilde's, and certainly not anything that could be mistaken for a direct line to heaven without ecclesiastical supervision. Dreams, as declared in several medieval synods, were dangerous because they could just as easily come from hell as from heaven. Canon law warned that visions untested by clergy were suspect. That meant your smoky spinning wheel might have been divine or demonic, and in the absence of a trained confessor, good luck figuring out which. Peasants dreamed anyway. They couldn't afford not to. In a world without anesthesia, therapy, or news, dreams were one of the only places where you could receive relief, guidance, or warning, even if it was wrapped in a snake's hiss or a saint's bleeding eyes. Some villagers swore by dream books, tattered pages passed hand to hand that told you what each symbol meant. A black dog, betrayal. Falling teeth, a death in the family. A white bird, luck, maybe. Unless it was flying left. Then it meant taxes. The church frowned on those books. Too pagan, too chaotic, too unsupervised. But the books survived. They always do. You once borrowed one from a traveling tinker. It had illustrations that looked older than your house, and half the pages smelled like old soup. But still, you flipped through it late one night after a dream of red rivers. It said you'd see blood. The next week, your goat gave birth. Close enough. Now, after the vigil, you wonder if you should have looked something up. But there's no time. Because here comes Brother Coldest, robes flapping like judgment in motion. You felt something last night, he says, nod asks, and you nod again. Then you must speak to the prior. It's procedure. The word procedure doesn't sit well in your mouth, like eating salted ash. But refusing isn't wise, not when your dream might be interpreted as prophecy or heresy. You follow him, and as you pass the square, you notice the wall. It's covered with parchment, dream declarations from others. A woman saw a flaming angel hovering above the barn. A boy saw 3 moons bleeding into one. A shepherd dreamed of wolves dancing in cassocks. You're not alone, but the tension is thicker than your winter cloak. The church has always tried to balance 2 ideas, that God speaks through dreams and that the devil does too. Augustine, Aquinas, even Isidore of Seville all wrestled with this paradox. You can't ban dreams, but you can warn about them. You can control the telling. And that's where you're headed now, to be told what your dream meant by someone who didn't have it. Inside the priory, it's warmer than it should be, the kind of warmth that feels borrowed from another life. Tapestries line the walls, candles flicker. The prior sits in a chair that's trying very hard to look unimpressed. Describe it, he says. You do. The wheel, the feathers, the voice. He listens with his eyes half closed, fingers steepled. A test, he finally murmurs. Or a warning. He writes something down. You don't see what. You'll need to fast. 3 days. No bread, only broth. No speaking except to God. You nod, and he dismisses you like a wind brushing off a leaf. Outside, the sun is high, but the light feels filtered, like truth seen through stained glass. Fringe accounts mention villagers who were imprisoned after dream revelations contradicted local clergy. One woman claimed the Virgin told her the church roof would collapse. When it did, they arrested her anyway. Too suspicious. Historians still argue whether the medieval church suppressed dreams for control or genuinely feared the devil's reach through sleep. But you suspect it was both. Power and fear are old bedfellows. Back in your hut, the fire needs tending. Berta eyes you with indifference. The dream lingers. Not its images, but its weight, like a robe you can't take off. You sit, you breathe, you sip broth, and somewhere in the corner of your mind, the wheel still spins. That night, you don't sleep so much as wait. Wait for the moment when your mind might flicker again, when your soul, if that's what it is, will be tugged by something older and stronger than logic. But it's not fear that keeps you awake. It's curiosity, and maybe a little dread. Because in the Middle Ages, dreaming wasn't passive. It was a test, a message, a visitation. You didn't dream about something, you dreamed with something. Saints, angels, demons, and the echoes of your own guilt. And sometimes they fought. Eventually, sleep takes you like a wave over cold stone. This time it starts in a field. A lamb walks across frost-covered grass. Its fleece is clean, too clean. It turns, looks at you, and then opens its mouth and speaks. Not in words, but in images. Blyer. A tower falling. Then a woman veiled in gold holding a book that drips ink onto the soil. You wake up with a gasp, your breath fogging in the room like steam from a boiling pot. Visions like this weren't rare in medieval Europe. Monks recorded them meticulously. In cloisters across the continent, scribes wrote about peasants and pilgrims dreaming of ladders to heaven, fiery wheels, saints walking through walls, and even Jesus himself stepping into kitchens to stir soup. And those weren't even the weird ones. There's a documented case from 13th century Spain. A shepherd dreamed of a bleeding saint who handed him a key. He woke up and dug at the spot in his dream and uncovered a forgotten reliquary buried in the ground. The church celebrated him, then confiscated the key. Dreams were both treasure maps and court summons. And now you wonder where yours is leading. You visit Matilda. She's boiling something that smells like bark and bitterness. You dreamed again, she says without turning. You nod. She tosses a handful of something into the pot. Was there a lamb? Your spine tightens. Yes, she stirs. They always come before change, or death, or a wedding. Same thing, really. You sit by the hearth, staring at the flames. Your fingers are still cold. There were fringe beliefs that lambs in dreams were messengers from the Archangel Gabriel, symbols of sacrifice or purity, but some also believed they were masks worn by more sinister forces, wolves in wool, so to speak. You tell Mathilde about the woman with the book. She scowls. Could be Saint Bridget, could be Saint Catherine, could be your mother warning you to clean your feet. She pours you a ladle of bark tea and insists you drink. As it scalds your throat, you remember that not all dreams were just for the dreamer. In medieval times, some were seen as communal omens. If one person dreamed of fire, the village might prepare for famine. If two dreamed of blood, the priest might fast for 7 days. And if a child claimed to see Mary, everyone gathered, not always kindly. So, you go to the chapel again, but this time the priest doesn't meet your eyes. He's speaking with a merchant, one who rumor says has been dreaming of a black sun. You're told to wait. So, you sit on the stone bench by the door. You trace the etchings of old names into the wall and think of the lamb's eyes. Somewhere above, pigeons shift in the eaves. The church's dream logic was selective. One bishop's vision could redirect armies. One peasant's dream might earn a beating. Power determined whose sleep was sacred. Still, villagers shared dreams in whispers, around fires, in market stalls, through embroidered symbols on cloaks or subtle carvings on doorposts. There's even evidence of dream circles, groups who met to discuss visions, secretly and cautiously, kind of like therapy, but with more candles and less Freud. Historians still argue whether these dream groups were proto-religious sects or just lonely people trying to make sense of things. Either way, the dreams persisted, carried through famine and war, plague and prayer. That night, you dream again. The lamb returns. This time its eyes are closed. It leads you down a staircase carved into the earth. Below, the woman waits again, this time weeping ink. She hands you a key, and the tower from before cracks at its base. You wake up shivering. The fire has gone out again, and on your hand, just dirt, probably, is a dark smear you don't remember getting. The key is not real. Probably. You keep telling yourself that as you wash your hands in the freezing water basin, rubbing until your fingers go red and the dark smear fades into the cracks of your skin. But the dream won't leave you. Not like others. This one clings like smoke in wool, faint but lingering. So you do what many medieval minds did when dreams stuck like thorns. You seek an interpreter. You walk past the chapel this time. No more priests. You turn instead to the edge of the village where old Rafa lives. He's a cooper by trade, but known for other things. Herbal cures, strange poems, and once he supposedly predicted a barn fire 3 days before it happened. Some call him wise, others a fraud. Most, both. You knock. He answers with a cough and a stare. I need a dream untangled, you say. He lets you in. Inside, the air smells like smoke, garlic, and some third thing you can't name. Dried herbs dangle from the rafters like upside-down dancers. There's a black cat on the table, chewing a goose feather. Rafi motions for you to sit and listens as you describe the lamb, the book, the key. When you're done, he hums like a kettle on the verge of boiling. Could be prophetic. Could be indigestion. Did you eat onions? Yes. He nods solemnly, as if that changes everything. In the Middle Ages, dream interpretation was a murky art. Some believed God encoded messages in sleep, others thought dreams were the devil's playground, and still others claimed they were just echoes of daily life. Aristotle argued that dreams were bodily functions, while figures like Macrobius and Boethius developed elaborate classification systems: symbolic, prophetic, nightmare, fantasy. Rafi prefers simplicity. A lamb is purity, he mutters, or sacrifice, or lunch. You blink. The key opens something, or locks it, or both. He shrugs. Dreams don't give answers, they give riddles. You nod slowly. And the woman? He grimaces. Saint? Demon? Dead relative? Hard to say without more sleep. You leave him a coin. He gives you a walnut carved with a spiral. For protection, he says, or digestion. Either way, it won't hurt. You tuck it into your cloak. There were entire manuscripts devoted to dream symbols in the medieval period. One English volume claimed dreaming of fire meant divine anger, unless the fire was blue, in which case it meant jealousy. Another swore dreaming of goats foretold sexual temptation. You're glad Berta hasn't shown up in your dreams yet. Some dream interpreters were even summoned by nobles and kings. A few made careers from it, wandering from court to court like medieval fortune tellers. Of course, if your interpretation angered the wrong person, you could find yourself declared a heretic or worse. Fringe accounts mention a woman in Brittany who claimed to see the future in her dreams. She predicted a noble's death, was thanked publicly, and then vanished quietly 2 weeks later. Some say she fled. Others say she was silenced. Still, the pull of understanding your dream lingers. Later, Matilde corners you by the well. She eyes you sideways and mutters, "I dreamed of a black sun last night, like the merchant." Your throat tightens. "Did it say anything?" you ask. She shakes her head. "Just spun, fast and slow, like it wanted to unravel me." Shared dreams were sometimes considered divine warnings. In times of plague, villagers compared visions. Dreams of serpents, burning bread, or bleeding stones were taken as omens. Communities responded by fasting, holding processions, or, less helpfully, accusing each other of witchcraft. That night, you lie in bed and try not to dream. But you do. You dream of doors, hundreds of them, all closed, all marked with symbols you almost recognize. Behind one, the lamb bleats. Behind another, the woman weeps. Behind a third, your own voice calls for help. You wake up with your fist clenched around something. It's the carved walnut, still there. Historians still argue whether medieval dream interpretation was spiritual practice, folk medicine, or early psychology. Some suggest it was all three, an effort to impose meaning on a world that offered none, especially in winter. You stare at the ceiling, the shadows feel like sentences. You know one thing, dreams weren't just night thoughts. They were maps, letters, warnings, invitations, and you've just started reading yours. You're not exactly desperate, yet, but the dream keeps echoing through your chest like a church bell you can't unring. So tonight, you prepare differently, not just for sleep, but for entry into whatever that place was. The one with the doors, the lamb, and the weeping woman. You begin by brewing a tea. Not because you read about it in some scroll, but because that's what Matilda said worked once, maybe, who knows. You crush dried poppy heads with a pestle, sprinkle in mugwort leaves, and tear a sprig of thyme from above your hearth. It smells earthy and suspicious, like your floorboards trying to whisper secrets. Sleep herbs in the medieval world were strange and powerful things. Poppy was used for pain and dreaming, mugwort for visions, and thyme, well, no one agreed on thyme. Some thought it kept spirits away, others used it for seasoning lamb. You sip anyway. You light a small candle and scratch a symbol into the soot-blackened wood. A spiral, like the walnut, like the dream. Protection? Invitation? Again, you're not sure. But it feels right. You place the walnut beside your mat like it might grow into answers overnight. People in the Middle Ages didn't just sleep. They prepared for sleep, especially if they were hoping for a holy dream. Some wrapped themselves in specific garments. Others whispered prayers to saints who were said to appear in visions, like Saint Julian, patron of travelers, or Saint Raphael, associated with healing dreams. You lie down. The warmth from the tea hasn't made it to your toes, but your mind begins to sway gently, like a boat unmoored. The fire pops once, then stillness, and you drift. In your dream, you're in a chapel, but it's empty. The pews are shadows, the altar is a well. You look down into it and see stars, not reflected, but real, as if the sky's been poured into stone. Then a voice behind you says, "One dream opens, another seals." You turn. No one. You wake up damp with sweat and unable to speak. Historically, visionary dreams were often described in elaborate, metaphorical detail. Think spinning wheels of fire, mountains that bled gold, or animals with too many eyes. Some of these were thought to be divine messages, others warnings, and a few were seen as punishment for too much indulgence. You weren't indulgent, you were just curious. Still, the air feels different now. You reach for the walnut, it's warm. Sleep in the Middle Ages wasn't always passive. Some treated it as a quest, a place to meet spirits, saints, or even God himself. Others feared it as a doorway demons could slip through. There were recorded cases of people creating dream wards from dried herbs, small bones, or iron keys tucked beneath pillows. You've got mugwort ash on your lips and no pillow. The dream refuses to explain itself, but you remember the chapel, the well, the stars, and the sentence. You find a piece of charcoal and sketch it on your wall before it fades from memory. One dream opens, another seals. The morning sun is faint, but it arrives anyway, indifferent to how cracked your voice sounds. You step outside and find Matilde already there, rubbing frost off her shutters with a rag that's also probably been a bandage, scarf, and potato bag. She eyes you. Sleep? You nod. See anything? You hesitate. A chapel, a well full of stars. She drops the rag. That's a seeker's dream, she says quietly. They say only those on the edge get those. Edge of what? She shrugs. Edge. Of course. Fringe texts from the 14th and 15th centuries detail seekers, individuals who experienced recurring symbolic dreams tied to spiritual or apocalyptic awakenings. Most were monks, some were burned, a few vanished after their final vision. You're not sure which list you want to be on. Back inside, you wrap the walnut in cloth and place it under the ashes of your hearth, just in case. Historians still argue whether herbal dream work was medicinal, ritualistic, or merely hopeful self-deception. But to you, last night felt like a message passed through smoke, like something or someone is waiting. You light another candle, and you prepare again. You barely speak all day. You're not sick, not exactly. Just tuned to a different frequency. The wind sounds distant. The goat's bleating echoes like it's bouncing through cathedral arches. Even Matilda's sarcasm feels muffled, like your ears are still halfway inside the dream. And then it ends, and then it happens again. You fall asleep after sunset, earlier than you meant to, and you're not in your bed anymore. You're standing in a clearing, snow all around, black breath blooming in curls. Across from you stands something tall, draped in robes that never touch the ground. No face, just a smooth silver disc where the head should be. It raises a hand. You raise yours. It mirrors you. Then it lunges. You jolt awake, arm raised in defense, and your shoulder aches like you've been hit. You roll over, trembling. There's a faint scratch along your wrist, a real one. And that's when it clicks. You're not dreaming alone anymore. Night battles in medieval dream lore weren't just symbolic. They were real to those who experienced them. Accounts describe monks waking with wounds after battling phantasms, or villagers certain they fought demons in their sleep. Sometimes the bruises were visible. Sometimes only the fear remained. You rise and wash your face with melted snow. The scratch stings. You don't tell Matilde. She'd nod and say, "Ah," and that's worse. People in the Middle Ages didn't separate body and spirit as neatly as modern minds do. What happened in the soul bled into the bones. If you saw the Virgin Mary in a dream, you woke healed. If a demon chased you, you'd limp for days. And if you met a celestial figure, something was expected of you. You sit by the fire, rubbing salve onto your wrist. It smells like tallow and thyme, which is either curative or lunch, depending on the day. That night, you sleep clutching the walnut. You dream again, but this time you fight. There's a stairwell, endless and crumbling. You climb. The walls whisper, asking questions. Why do you come? What will you give? What do you fear? You answer none of them. You reach the top. A mirror waits there. It shows you. Only not you. It's a version that smiles wrong. You throw the walnut at the mirror, and it shatters. You wake, breathless. The walnut in your palm is cracked open. Inside, something black, slick, and glistening. Not a seed. Not anything you've seen before. You wrap it in a cloth. Set it in the coals. It smokes, hisses, then vanishes. Medieval theologians wrote of dream objects crossing into the waking world. Hildegard of Bingen spoke of dream fires that could leave singers on your blankets. A Czech account from 1362 described a woman coughing up salt for days after dreaming of drowning in the sea. Historians still argue whether these were metaphors, psychosomatic events, or undiscovered medical conditions. But to the villagers, they were real, and they shaped behavior, lives, whole identities. You're no longer curious. You're cautious. The next day, a traveling friar arrives. He carries no bags, just a wooden staff etched with swirling symbols. His robes are indigo, faded at the hem, and he walks like he's seen far worse winters than this. Matilda greets him with a nod. "Dream chaser," she mutters. You blink. He smiles at you like he already knows. "Dreams been loud?" he asks. You nod. He doesn't ask more. Instead, he sits by your hearth that evening, adds 2 sprigs of wormwood to your fire. The room smells bitter and sharp. "You'll dream again," he says. and this time, you'll have company. The phrase feels like both a promise and a warning. Sleep comes slow that night, but it comes, and the battle resumes. Awaiting continue. Friar sleeps in the corner unmoving, like he's held together by prayer and frost. Meanwhile, you toss, not because of the cold, but because you're waiting. You know the moment is near. You can feel it in the way the fire breathes, in the way Berta the goat hasn't moved in an hour, in the silence between gusts of wind where something else is breathing, and then it begins. Not with the dream, but with a sound, a ringing, clear, high, and strange, like a bell made from ice. It draws you in, and suddenly you're standing on the edge of a cliff beneath a green-black sky. The stars are too bright. The ground glows faintly beneath your feet. And there in the distance is the chapel again. Only this time it's cracked down the middle. The friar is there too, barefoot, walking toward the fissured building like it's his own grave. You follow. This is not just a dream. This is liturgy. It has its own rules, its own ritual. In the Middle Ages, these kinds of shared visions weren't treated like coincidences. They were seen as divine summons or demonic traps. Theologians debated endlessly whether multiple people could be pulled into the same dream space by holy or infernal forces. Some called them spiritual convergences. Others called them heresies. You step into the chapel and feel time slow. The altar still contains the well of stars. The pews are full now, but not with people, with forms. Blank, watchful, faceless, waiting. The friar turns to you and says, "Ask your question." You freeze, because you didn't know you were supposed to bring one. "What happens," you whisper, "if we stop dreaming?" Everything shakes, the floor crumbles, the sky opens, the stars swirl, and then you're awake. The friar is already up, boiling water like nothing happened. "You asked the wrong question," he says. You stare. "How do you know?" He raises an eyebrow. "Because you're still here." Historically, there are tales of dream pilgrims who vanished, people who went to sleep and never woke up, leaving behind twisted sheets and occasionally footprints burned into the floor. Some texts claim these were chosen. Others say they simply wandered too far. You're not sure where the line is, but you're dancing close to it. That day, the friar draws symbols in chalk on your wall. A spiral, a flame, a feather. He doesn't explain them, just says, "For tonight." And you nod, because questions are starting to feel expensive. You try to spend the day normally. Chop wood. Feed Berta. Boil soup made mostly of hope and garlic skins. Matilde drops by and doesn't mention the smell of ash in your hair. She does, however, glance at the chalk marks and purse her lips. "I had those once," she says softly. "When I was young." You blink. "Did they help?" She shrugs. "Didn't hurt." At sunset, the friar lights a bundle of herbs and places it beneath your bed. "Tonight," he says, "we end it, or change it." You lie down and think of endings, of cracked chapels, of questions without answers, and then you're dreaming again. Only this time, you are in the chapel first, alone. The pews are empty, the altar well is dry, and behind you stands a mirror. This time, when you turn, your reflection doesn't move. It smiles. Not wrong, just tired, and you understand. The battle isn't with the demon, it's with yourself, with the version of you that gave up on asking questions, the version that stopped wondering if dreams meant anything at all. You reach out, touch the glass, and it becomes water. You fall through into warmth, and then nothing. You wake up to sunlight. Real sunlight, no frost, no ghosts. The friar is gone, but the spiral remains. So does the sense that something shifted, not broken. It's been a week. No dreams, no ghosts, just sleep. You still shiver at night, still wake up to frozen socks and a goat chewing your bootlaces, but the air in your hut feels thinner. Not lighter, exactly, just less crowded, as though whatever followed you through those nights has finally exhaled and moved on. You keep the spiral chalked on the wall, redraw it every day. It's not magic, probably. Just something to do with your hands when you're tired and thinking too much. Matilda comes by more often now, brings stew and stories. She doesn't ask about your dreams, but she glances at your eyes like she's checking for cloud cover. "You look less haunted," she says one morning, as she stirs ashes into her tea. "Still like a drafty blanket, but less scream in your sleep." You thank her. Then you laugh, and that's how you know you're healing. Historically, healing dreams were prized in the medieval world. Shrines like those at Epidaurus or later Christian pilgrimage sites encouraged visitors to sleep beside relics. hoping to receive visions that could restore body or soul. Some claimed to wake with cured wounds. Others left with strange messages. Some, with a name whispered in the dark, they were meant to marry or forgive. You didn't go on pilgrimage, but maybe it came to you. You try writing your dreams down. They don't come anymore. Only flickers, a flash of stars, a cold bell tone, a smile that doesn't feel dangerous. Somewhere, a rooster crows out of season. Even nature seems confused. You rebuild your woodpile, fix the leaking roof. You even make Matilda a little charm from twisted straw and dried thyme, just in case. She accepts it like it's a royal gift and pretends not to tear up. The cat sits beside you now, less like a tyrant, more like a roommate with opinions. You feed it scraps, it tolerates you. At night, you hum lullabies again, off-key, always off-key. But there's something in that broken music that feels sacred now. Maybe that's what the friar meant by company. Not him, not spirits, just you, with yourself. Dream theology in the 14th century leaned hard into binaries. Dreams were divine or demonic, sent or sinful, guided by grace or hijacked by hell. But some thinkers, mystics especially, argued for a third way, a human way, where dreams were neither trial nor message, but part of what made us us. You think about that often, about the version of you in the mirror. Still there, still waiting, maybe always. But now you're not afraid to meet their eyes. You dream once more a few nights later. It's not a vision, not a chapel, just a snow-covered field. You walk through it barefoot, but the snow doesn't hurt. Ahead is a fire. Not yours, someone else's. You sit beside it, they nod. No words, just warmth. And when you wake, the fire in your hearth is still going. Unusual, unnatural, or maybe, finally, just enough. You roll over and sleep again, willingly. The winter doesn't end, not yet, but it loosens, a little. You hear it in the way the snow melts faster on rooftops, leaving dark lines like ink bleeding through parchment. You see it in how the trees shift. Less brittle, more breathing. You feel it in your joints, in your breath, in the slight warmth that lingers longer each morning before the frost creeps back in. Berta, the goat, is louder again. Greedy. Alive. You too. The villagers start coming out more. Not like a festival, just longer walks to the well, louder voices through cracked shutters, laughter sometimes, even if it sounds like coughing dressed up for a feast. Matilde tells you she dreamed again. About the chapel, she says, sipping broth that smells like onions and barely like hope. But it wasn't broken this time. You nod, because you know. Dreams, it turns out, aren't something to fear. They're a kind of weather, a kind of map. A language spoken in your own voice when the world is too loud to hear anything else. Mainstream texts in the late medieval period began to shift, ever so slightly, away from extremes. Not every dream was a prophecy. Not every nightmare a curse. Some were just reminders of longing, of memory, of hunger, of love, of your place in the world, even when that place was under a leaky roof and beside a thieving goat. Fringe theories, often mocked at the time, suggested that dreams might come from the body, digestion, fatigue, pain, pleasure, that they weren't gifts or traps, but echoes of what you ate, of what you feared, of what you dared to wish for in the brief, impossible moments between shivering and silence. You stand at the edge of the village one evening, looking at the forest. The wind still cuts, but you don't flinch. You remember the mirror, the smile, the question you asked, what happens if we stop dreaming? You didn't get an answer, but you got this, a fire that stayed lit, a cat that came back, a friend who dreams beside you. That might be the answer. Historians still argue whether medieval dream beliefs were more about control or connection, whether visions were used to enforce doctrine or open doors, whether people were dreaming of salvation or just of dinner. You don't argue anymore. You dream, and you wake and you dream again. Until one day, you don't remember whether you're asleep or just breathing in the softness of a firelit room, the taste of time in the air, and the quiet weight of a blanket that, while still scratchy, no longer feels like punishment. And so you breathe, and let the dark come. And when you lie down, it feels like a beginning, like trust, like home. And now, as the fire in your mind dims to gentle embers, let yourself curl deeper into this quiet. The village behind your eyes grows still again. The shutters don't rattle. The snow falls soft like ash from a memory long cooled. You've made it somehow through another impossible night in a world where dreams are whispers from gods or echoes of your own tired soul. There's no cold here now. Just hush. Just the comfort of knowing you are not the only one who wrestles sleep like it's something sacred, like it's something hard-won and worthy. You've shared a room with ghosts, with goats, with old thoughts and stranger hopes, and still, you're here. Maybe you were the chapel all along, cracked, but still standing. So let your breath deepen, let your thoughts drift wider, let the edges of everything soften, and if the dreams come, good, welcome them. If they don't, that's fine too. You've already done the brave thing. You stayed, you listened, you asked, you survived. Now let go. Sleep, not as surrender, but as arrival. A soft place to land, a door you close just for now, sweet dreams. End of script, sweet dreams.